ETFs are dropping, so it's time to buy. We have waited a long time, several months even, but it's finally time to start buying significantly again. Not all in, because more uncertainties and events could arise in the coming period. Therefore, take into account potential further price declines. However, the moment you want to buy is now and not during euphoric times. This is a mental shift that we will need to make. No problem. That is a nice learning process. Before we talk about the ETFs, I bought in the previous period. First, a small gift to our website, Happy Investors. There you will find all sorts of free downloads, including a free booklet about investing and stocks, a book about ETF investing, a kind of ETF share kit. If you read that booklet, you'll know enough about ETFs. You can compile a clear ETF portfolio. Again, for €0 and maybe 30 minutes of reading time, and it will definitely help you to invest better in ETFs. Hopefully these videos will too. Thank you always for watching. And let's take a look at the new ETF update. As promised, from now on, I will immediately share whenever I make new transactions. Welcome back to Happy Investors, and in this short update, a number of purchases for ETFs. Not long ago, I made an extensive portfolio update for April. Check out our monthly portfolio updates on our channel, Happy Investors. About that, much more information about the strategy, and also a bit of explanation about how since the summer of 2024, we have sold many positions from from America, and have taken positions in Europe. I have still held on to all those positions. We can see that here on the screen. And of course, if the market falls, those positions don't do well either. But some positions from America, for example, like Apple, Loving, have yielded enormous profits. And I have transferred that field to Maxim. I have also explained about that. Maxim is in any case much cheaper for the Netherlands, Belgium, and Europe to buy shares than the DEGIRO, mainly in dollars or other currencies. That has to do with the currency costs of the DEGIRO. They have increased quite a lot in recent periods. I never really paid much attention to that. But now that I have more and more assets, and also experience, I have gained with interactive brokers. And Maxim is actually a kind of, you can see it as a white label product of interactive brokers. They use the same software. Yes, I have indeed seen that Internet Brokers / Maxim offers much more functionality and is a lot cheaper. That's why you suddenly see 3 different accounts. The total order value, portfolio value, is about €330,000. So that is relevant to mention. Why? Because I naturally think in percentages, and you want to invest in percentages. We are going to talk about purchasing ETFs. First, let's take a step back. I'm talking about Maxim, a transition. We are a company from Happy Investors. Of course, we are also entrepreneurs. I am a better entrepreneur than an investor. What is the difference? An entrepreneur mainly takes a lot of action. I must say, with investing, you actually need to be very patient. And sometimes I buy too early or do just a bit too much trading. Sometimes it turns out well, just like the recent period. But sometimes it doesn't turn out well. And I've been doing this for more than 10 years. So yes, well, I'm just open and honest about it. You are better off just holding on for the very long term. But just like the recent period, I sold a lot. And that has worked out very well for me, because I actually just missed the total recent price drops of minus 15 to 20%. About Maxim, as I said, we are entrepreneurs, a company, and we have also, of course, created an offer for our members, people who follow us, together with Maxim. We also receive a partial fee for bringing in new members. That is affiliate collaboration, but we also have that with DEGIRO and with all other brokers. And DEGIRO and Maxim offer a relatively low fee because they are simply cheaper. Yes, then you can offer less compensation. That is just very open and honest. You can also find all of that on the internet. Nothing exciting about it. We also do not advise investing through Maxim or through DEGIRO, because as you can see, I still have an account with DEGIRO. So you have to decide for yourself what you do. If you want to switch or create a second account, then check the link you see in our description, or in the comments on our videos, or on the website, and then you can get €100 cashback. That €100 cashback means that you have €100 in transaction costs. Maxim means buying for US stocks, but not for euros. For that, you might be better off staying with DEGIRO, and I hope that DEGIRO maintains those pricing structures. So we're going to talk about purchasing ETFs. I had a bit of 2 things, actually. I had time to step out of America and mainly step into Europe, and I had also invested a bit in China ETF. I'll talk a bit more about that shortly, and a more recent purchase in a uranium ETF. It has actually only been done since I bought it, and the result is minus 17%. So that's not very good, super volatile. Also bought a bit more. I think it's super interesting for the long term. Only the most important thing we emphasize are the percentages. The Crane Shares ETF currently has a value of 15,000 euros. Converted to my total portfolio, that's about 5%. And the Uranium ETF is about 3%. You'll see with Maxim, I actually have a lot of cash at the moment. So I am still convinced that despite the historical price increase of this week by 10% for example, the S&P 500, I believe that the price will continue to fall further simply because of the effects that are happening now with tariffs, uncertainty. All of that will impact the economy and companies, and that will only become visible in the coming quarters. So I remain very patient and wait. And I must say, I've been investing for quite a long time, but it still occupies my mind. Ideally, I would have liked to be 100% invested. Why? Then you can't do anything about it anymore. The only thing you can do is, if you still have cash coming in, every month you can buy more, but you should never sell at a loss. However, I already sold quite a lot, and now I have a lot of cash. So I actually find this position more difficult because I don't want to enter too late, but I also don't want to enter too early. Additionally, we also have quite a bit of cash position, namely 55% in my business portfolio. That was with Interactive Brokers, is housed with Maxim. Everything I say can be found in our other previous videos. Maybe a bit complex, 3 portfolios, but we'll get through it. And I've had this cash position for a long time because I established this business portfolio since last year. And I have also repeatedly mentioned every week, month, yes, I do think it's all a bit overheated. And I also don't know what the trigger will be, but the chance that stocks will fall or even crash is high. Well, Trump turned out to be the trigger, but no idea. I don't have a crystal ball either. It's also just, I think, chances. Simply put, if the market is overheated, the chance that it will decline is greater. In this case, no ETFs yet, only equities and real estate, and I will give an update in a separate video about stocks I have recently purchased. That also applies to the DEGIRO, but at Maxim we just remain patient. And one of the ETFs I have purchased is the Queen's Share China Internet ETF. A bit regarding news, China has today raised the tariffs again on USA. So this is a nice trade war, as they call it. I am very curious how this will turn out. I also don't really know what the long-term effects of this will be, but I think almost no one really knows. Economists are particularly bad at forecasting, so not better than the average person. I think you just have to think logically. And yes, these trade wars, this obviously cannot continue indefinitely, continuously increasing. That's not possible at all. And America is also heavily affected because it buys a lot, of course, raw materials from China. But still, all of this does have an effect, those tariffs, because the ETF I bought, the Queen's Share China Internet ETF, includes companies like JD.com, Alibaba, Tencent, which are essentially all internet companies. And a large part of their revenue is generated from consumer spending. And tariffs naturally always have a direct impact on prices. Also, the inflation that isn't cooperating, the interest rates that are still relatively high, but China has indicated, as they mentioned a little while ago, that was also the reason to invest in it. Listen, we are going to fully stimulate where necessary. Moreover, all these internet ETF stocks, Alibaba and the like, they all have a very healthy valuation, even a bit cheap perhaps for the long term. And I am actually a big proponent of the other aspect of investing in the Invesco QQQ. And I want to invest a lot in it. Only, as you can see, I need a lot of patience to invest my cash. The Invesco QQQ has dropped significantly. It climbed strongly this week. It's starting to decline again now. And the Invesco QQ is actually just, yes, it includes a lot of technological or innovative companies, but primarily from America. That is a very strong ETF, in my opinion. And I'm just waiting for a really good entry point. Only a small position that I actually want to build up to 10% is that of the China Internet ETF. And, that 10% is just an allocation. If it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. But still, there's a good chance that it will work. It's actually not the first time I've sold this ETF. I'll show the transaction differences briefly. And first of all, I had bought in dollars. And the very first time was in 2021. So that was quite a while ago. I then bought at a higher price, namely 30, 33, 28, than I sold at 24. So actually, on the initial trades, I incurred a loss. This was after a significant drop. I just got in too early. So that's an important lesson. Point. If we zoom out to the weekly level of 2021, that's somewhere around this period. And since then, it has actually only moved horizontally. Moved, only gradually increased. As we can see here, actually just continuously bought more, and thus sold the last additional purchases at a serious profit, around 15 to 25%. And the reason I sold this is due to the transition to MEXEM. You can see the transaction costs here. That's quite a lot of money. So the order value, the transaction costs in terms of order value are only €1 for us. MEXEM, only the volume costs together are €55. That's 0.25%. At MEXEM, it's cheaper that way. I was a bit lucky. Why? Because this sale of this total position was $20,000 on March 31st. And if we look at March 31st, that's actually this point here. I sold here, and we see a different price here because this is the KWBE, which is a euro currency. But the price is, of course, the same, just converted to euros. Since then, it has dropped by about 20%. So during this transition, what can you see? In the short term, you see a peak, you see a second peak, you see a third peak, and it starts to decline. There is also news coming. I am absolutely not a trader, but thinking logically and sensibly is just something when all momentum suddenly becomes negative. And I was already in the transition from DEGIRO to MEXEM. Yes, then I think it's very simple. So I had sold, and that also has a reason because I wanted to convert it to euros, so that in the future, if I continue with the same ETF, I simply have lower transaction costs. But it's a combination of timing, strategic currency decision, and a lot of luck. Since then, it hasn't dropped much, but I bought again around 13.8, 13.8, 13.8, 13, 13, and $14. So eventually I bought more. 14% cheaper. Long story. And it can still drop a lot further from this point. The last wall is in September 2024. It could be another minus 20%. But at least I've already saved 15% loss and just bought again. Perfect market. Timing doesn't exist anyway. And actually, why I haven't bought up to the 10% yet, so I can still invest another €15,000 to reach that 10%. It's just because of all the developments, maybe I'll get lucky and the price will indeed drop further to, for example, a price level of around $11 or $10, and then I'll simply buy more. If not, I'll just hold on. All right, and finally, we see here the purchase transaction orders from the last period. So from April 8th and from April 10th. As you can see, perfect market timing doesn't exist anyway. I bought more at a lower price, so I'm satisfied. Saved some losses. Actually, quite a lot. Bought more at a lower price, and I really buy this ETF for the very long term. So 5 years, maybe 10 years, we'll see. But it can happen from time to time in the interim periods, depending on the valuation that I sell and buy more at a lower price. That process naturally keeps repeating. Sometimes it looks good, sometimes not so good. In any case, the lesson learned is that for ETFs, you just have to stay in for the very long term. And up to now, I'm still doing that. The second ETF I bought, actually also this week, is the Uranium Miners ETF. We've actually talked about it before. A very volatile ETF, not suitable for beginners, absolutely not. And the theme is uranium, which is logical and is for long-term energy. I believe energy is a very important topic for the next 10 years. There might be a huge bull market emerging because in recent years there has simply been much less investment. And uranium was, of course, essentially a kind of neglected sector. Well, that's often where you find the biggest opportunities. I just buy an ETF because I don't have much knowledge, content-wise, of that market. I do know that there are many developments. We're not going to talk about that now. And a uranium miners ETF is basically just like, for example, a gold miners ETF. Simply companies that mine uranium. There have been some interesting developments, and now it has dropped a lot. I think I'm going to start buying a little bit. Again, we'll just see how that works. The total position is a value of €10,000. That's not a small amount. 10,000 euros is, of course, not nothing. But in terms of percentages of my total portfolio, it's only 3%. That's a 3% loss. Okay? And the upward potential is indeed quite a bit larger. So first bought on March 24 was the initial purchase, and now recently bought a little more the day before, yesterday on April 9th, because it continued to decline. If we look at the charts, how they are going, so the ETF has already dropped a lot. Compared to the peak, it had dropped by about 42%, 43%, and then it rose again. And I actually just bought at this peak, somewhere around here. That was also based on a nice support level. Nicely risen. Yes, with volatile ETFs, it sometimes works to just look at charts. Not always, as you can see. That's part of the game. And so recently bought again at a price of 5.8. So that is somewhere in the ballpark. Just below there. And if you zoom out, then that's about at the same price level that it was around 2023. I would have wanted to buy it here. Yes, of course, but you never know that completely in advance. So minus 70% is the result so far, and I will wait a bit. If it stabilizes now, I will occasionally buy a little more. I want to let the position grow to 5%. Will I lose 5% of my total? So be it. But I think the long-term potential of this ETF is quite interesting. But with an emphasis on long-term and very volatile, as you can see, actually in relatively short periods of months, that such an ETF actually fluctuates a lot. Dropped by 20%, then rose again by 20%, then increased by 100%. From this price level, the upward potential, purely based on the chart, is 100%. I just think for the long term that a lot of energy is simply needed. We are not going to discuss this thesis in detail now. As mentioned earlier, the sale is in uranium. I think it's interesting. Simply put, a lot of energy is needed for the future, and uranium is one of the solutions. That's about ETFs. Buying and selling. As I say, market timing as a factor never exists. My Octophiles is holding up reasonably well now, although the one from DEGIRO has shrunk significantly. From MEXEM, yes, that's in the cash position, so I'm not losing money with it. And the Internet Broker's account position year-to-date performance is minus 6%. That is not good. However, the S&P 500 is down 11%, and the QQQ is down 13%. So in that context, I have less loss, and that's purely because of the cash position that is still in effect. But this period is ultimately the time to get excited. If that recession hits, we will experience bad market times in the coming months. These are really the moments when I think you especially want to do a lot of research. You should be happy, especially look at the opportunities that arise. Especially, my stocks become significantly undervalued due to pessimism. And sooner or later, the pumping will stop. What the long-term effects of these tariffs are, for example, and all the plans being implemented now. No idea. In the long term, consumption is still economic growth. The world population continues to increase. People will naturally always want to grow. So economic growth is the assumption. And if you don't have that as an assumption, then you shouldn't invest in stocks. That's about the ETF portfolio. A new update soon, probably tomorrow, about stocks. Thanks for watching. Comments, let us know. Nice that you follow and give a thumbs up. That helps us grow in the algorithm. And see you soon.